Hello and welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the silver Aston Martin DB SV8. If you didn't catch the last episode, we did a final strip down on the car, removing the doors, various bits of trim, chrome, locking barrels, all that sort of thing, so we could press on with metalwork. I had started doing a little bit of metalwork a while ago, but that was more of just for the fun of it. I'd spent so much time removing filler, I wanted a bit of a change. But today is really the first time I'm endeavouring to remove as many dents as possible. There's not that many, which I'll show you shortly, and also prep the surface. So sand the car so it's in a uniform texture and essentially see what we've got. A huge goal of mine, if you've seen the other episodes, is not to use filler. And I've been speaking to a lot of people who are professional metal workers who restore these cars, who do concourse restorations, and it's actually been really interesting and slightly changed my opinion. I'm not saying we're going to fill this car up, not at all, but I suppose I had this fallacy that Aston Martins were perfect, and they were perfect from the factory and they were never filled, none of that sort of thing. And, you know, proper restorers never put any filler on cars. And to be honest, that's not really true. I've been told by a lot of restorers who have been involved in restoring very untouched cars that when they've removed the original paint, they found areas of filler. Of course, I'm not talking about massive waves of it, but just it was put on the car. And actually, funnily enough, you'll see in an upcoming episode where I work on the red Aston, I got to the point where I was removing some rivets and actually I found filler in the vent section. So that was interesting because that was under original paint as well. So indeed, the fallacy that they are perfect is incorrect. I think perhaps a bit later on by the Virage era, they got a lot better, but certainly in the 60s and 70s, they were obviously always beautifully made, but some body working was done, which is fine. With this also in mind, for those of you who have seen this series before, I'm very much of the mentality preservation over restoration. And with that said, of course, we can sand the metal to a point if there's small divots and that sort of thing, but you don't want to over sand it and, you know, make the metal lose its integrity. It's aluminium, it is thin, so we do have to be careful. But ultimately today we're going to remove some dents, get the surface nice, and then we should have a proper understanding of what we're working with and be able to form a way forward. So let's jump right in and get the car out. So here she is, as you can see, very much stripped, which is what we did in the last episode. Really today we'll be focusing on everything from the A-pillars back. And that is because the whole front end is being replaced. That is a different entity in itself. But this area is all generally very good. So it's more of a case of seeing how perfect we can get the metal at this stage. As you can see, I've had quite a lot of time with this panel, if you look at the kind of difference in finish. And I've also had quite a lot of time with the boot. But if you look, all of these kind of darker spots are low spots. The mixture of low spots is for a couple of reasons. These very faint ones are low spots from the paint removal process, and they're sitting in a dent. That's why they're still there. So generally the panel is very smooth, but in order to get these low spots out, we need to remove the low spot that they sit in. But if we go around the car, I'll show you the worst areas. As you can see, there's been a dent here and someone has done the whole awful method of pulling it. But what we'll be doing, perhaps not today, is removing the spot welds here and just pulling this out, getting that flat, and that will be fantastic. We've got this rather lovely dent in the boot. I'm unsure, I've got a couple of boots, I might just replace the boot, but we'll see what we can do with it. Obviously it's more significant because it has an actual kind of, not split, but that's the impact spot is actually kind of scarred the metal. It's not just a dent as such anymore. We have this little peculiar spot, which for some reason has been really, you can see, I don't know what's happened there and why it's got such a sharp finish. I'm not sure, maybe it was a method of getting filler to stick, unsure. This panel is generally very good, except for the big boy. This is an annoying one. It's not too hard though, surprisingly. So we're going to kick off with this fun one. So let's take a little check now we've done some cleaning up. The way I do this, and I'm not saying it's the correct way, but I kind of do it in 2 phases. Obviously, initially for me, it was getting this area out a decent amount, so we could then start to move this piece around. Obviously now we're trying to pull this out as much as possible. So that area needs to come down, push this all out, and then we can kind of torsion this piece, this part up by pulling this out a bit further. So that's what I'm kind of doing. I'm just taking it slow, having a nice time. So now we've got a lot more of its shape back. You can see all the low spots. So we need to now get those out. Need to do a lot more work here, but it's slowly getting there. So let's stick to this wing and try and deal with this upper section. It shouldn't be too hard. The thing we've got to keep in mind is this piece here, how it kind of goes into, from this structured area into nothing. But we're a little bit away from it, so we should be okay. So after a little bit of work, we've got everything a lot better. I've just lightly sanded it, well, more than lightly, with 80 grit, just to expose the low spots. So this was where it was all, this is the center of it here, where it was. Sorry, it's very hard to film. This is the center where it was. So that was our lowest point. We've gone a bit too high here. Obviously these are low spots. So we're getting there. And it's exposed low spots here as well. Those are low spots, but those are sandable low spots. So yeah, we'll keep working on it. Now let's tackle this one. As you can see, impact there and it's creased all the way down. It's quite obvious where it's happened on the inside. So there we have it. That's about as good as I can get it right now. It is all smooth, even this. The reason it still looks low is because it's shiny. We haven't sanded it yet. So these were the low spots. But the area I can't really solve right now without adding material is this area, which is not a big deal. It's just where the impact has been made. It's actually kind of left a bit of a scar. But the whole thing is much smoother now. We haven't got this kind of big orb going round. And once it's sanded, that will become even more clear. You'll have to excuse some of the shots in this video. It's very hard to film a bare metal car full stop, let alone when it's a sunny day. It's just impossible to, avoid shadows and see the surface for what it actually is. But I've now tackled the main dents, apart from the one just near the passenger door, but that is for a later date because I need to remove the seam and pull away. Of course, all the dents I've removed to date still have lots of little areas that I need to pull out and shaping I need to do. But the next step for me is to sand the whole car down in 80 grit so we can see all of the, minute dents over the whole car. And it's in that step where I'll be removing those dents and the new dents, like little dents created in removing the bigger dents, if that makes any sense at all. So let's go. So I've hit kind of all of the side panels with a rougher grit, and I've done just about as much as I want to do. So we're going to start going down the grits. If you're wondering why I haven't done the very kind of sharp edges and around the wheel arches, I'm going to do that later when we're at a higher grit, and I'm going to do that by hand for obvious reasons. It's just a precise area. Same with all these areas. I'm really just trying to assess the kind of wider panels at this stage and get those done. So I'm going to start going down the grits and getting to a slightly more pronounced surface. This is a good example of what I was referencing earlier. So from a paint removal process at some point in its life, this has happened. And essentially what they are is that you can barely feel them, but they are low spots. And because it's actually just on the outside of the car, you can't go on the inside of the panel and pull it out. So of course you can keep sanding, but then you are thinning the metal. So this is where, in my opinion, and lots of metal workers have told me, that you should just kind of put a tiny bit of glazing over that. So it's not filling holes. When there's a dent you can actually get out, you do it. But when it's actually kind of an imperfection in the metal and it's not anything to do with the shape of it, it's a surface thing, that's when you need to apply a little bit of filler or glazing putty, all that sort of thing. And I feel at peace with that. I know it sounds really silly, but I was so adamant, oh, you know, no filler. But filler has a bad name when you're filling holes and big dents, and that's stupid. But, you know, when used in its correct purpose, it is really one of the only ways to get full-on concourse, especially when you're working with old metal that was never perfect in the first place. Okay, so I've skipped ahead a little bit because there's only so much you can show of the utter tedium that is sanding. So this panel, and the boot are in 120 grit. So you can see it's a lot more of a refined surface. You can still see all of those grazes we've got there. That shows how, you know, they're so light, but you can just feel them. But anyway, so I might actually be able to get those out, having thought about it a bit more. But you can see I've done some more dent removal here. It doesn't really look like it. That long dark spot is because of a panel wipe. I was using it to gauge the line which we need to maintain. But that's looking a lot better. Need to get dent out there. The boot is in 120 grit as well. As you can see, I've left all these edging bits. Those are going to be done by hand. Yeah, the boot looks great apart from the obvious, but so I think I am just going to put a replacement boot on. But you can kind of see the contrast, the difference in finish between 120 grit and 80 grit, which is obviously the rough stuff we start with. It's so much more refined and shiny, but we're getting there. This dent is annoying, looks far worse in camera, but its shape is actually back. Its silhouette's back, which is, you know, the most important bit at this stage. But we're getting there. Right, here is the lovely 120 grit, almost all the way around the back area. So it's getting there, and these areas are getting lower and, higher. Well, you know what I mean, they're leveling out. Anyway, so we're getting there. Definitely a huge amount more work, but I'm just going to focus on the roof now. As you've just seen, I tried sanding it and it was just that took about an hour. So I'm going to apply some paint stripper and do that, and just at least then we can loosen everything, then we can hit it again. So let's do that. So a little bit of an aside from normal filming, I've just stopped by the bunker, which I don't think I've shown on the channel yet, but this is my bunker, which I share with a friend, where it's kind of overflow storage and for cars, parts, all that sort of thing. So I'll quickly show you a few things that are here because they're quite cool. I believe it's Cold War, but yeah, so lots of parts, lots of scimitar parts. There's an MGB, which is up for sale. This is my friend Alex's Mercedes, which is up for sale. And out here, the fun bit, my first car, Land Rover Defender 90. I'm emptying it out of all of the bits and bobs because I think it's going to be sold today, which is sad, but I need the cash for Astons. So yeah, and here is the TR4, which is also up for sale. Everything here is really for sale. I think this is sold as well, so that's good. That's been in my family for 44 years, which is kind of crazy. Then those two are Alex's as well. He's got the whole set of 280s. He's got the coupe, the four-door saloon, and the estate, which you saw in there. So yeah, quite a cool little area, little fleet. But after today, I'll be completely emptied out from here. So yeah, fun times.